and sharing with you all of the things that I know about in skydiving, which isn't a huge amount. There are definitely people out there who know more, but I'm going to try and call on all of my personal experiences and share them with you guys. And the purpose of that is kind of a couple of things. Obviously, it's a weird time at the moment where everyone's kind of stuck at home. We really want to go skydiving and we can't. So it's a way to give us something to do that at least hopefully we can be learning about and talking about skydiving, even if we're not actually doing it. And the other thing is to make sure that we're kind of continuing to develop our skills and to learn from one another, because I think that's one of the best things about our community, is that we've got so many people within it who've got so much to share. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to do this morning. I will not be able to work my screen. Here we go. This is absolutely seamless. So that's me. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Laura Hampton. I jump at Skydive Langer normally, and I'm part of a team called Chimera. So within Chimera, it's myself, Will, Sarah, James and Pete, and we've been competing with a different lineup previously. We used to have Chris, Judd and Matt as well, but we've been competing for, I think this is our 5th year now, so we do a lot of 4-way formation skydiving. I'm part of a team called the Awkward Turtles, which we haven't been going for the past couple of years now, but we were an 8-way team, so I've done quite a lot of that. I do load organising at Langer as well, so I've done quite a bit of kind of big way stuff, and I also like to free fly as well, so a bit of everything. And what I'm really going to be focusing on this morning is around formation skydiving specifically. So for anyone who doesn't know what formation skydiving is, I've defined it as the act of creating beautiful sky patterns like a total badass. As used in the sentence, she's a formation skydiving medalist and therefore I should buy her as many Jaeger bombs as she'd like. So that is what formation skydiving is. And what I'm talking about here is anything that we're doing where we're in the belly to earth formation. So if you're new to skydiving, you're not quite sure of the terminology yet, formation skydiving or FS is all the belly to earth stuff that you'll have been doing in your FS, in your AFF and in your static line jumps. And then anything outside of that is typically referred to as free flying. So that would be kind of sit, head down, all that kind of crazy different angle stuff that people do. So I'm going to be talking about the belly to earth stuff this morning. And the belly to earth stuff typically fits into one of 3 categories. So hopefully my slide will change. There we go. So I've defined them as big way. So big way is really anything over a 4-way, I suppose. So that shot that I've put there, that's actually us making a boob as part of a cancer awareness event that we did. But you can see that there's a smaller number of us there compared to what I've termed massive way, which is where you can be doing kind of 100 ways, 200 ways. And then there's 4-way as well. So that's what I do. If you are interested in learning more about big way or massive way, I think Emily Orcutt, JLo and Matt Cumming are going to be doing a session just like this next week, where they're going to be talking about everything you need to know to get started in big way. So they will be talking about that. But this morning I'm going to be talking about 4-way. So yeah, that's me with my 4-way team. I can see that Emily Orcutt is messaging me. Emily, how do I get in? Hopefully everybody's in. Cool, so what can you expect then from this session? Firstly, I'm going to talk about the FS1 programme. So for anyone who's on the webinar who has only just started, maybe you're on static line, maybe you're doing AFF, maybe you're just a uni student, you haven't even thought about doing your first jump yet and you just want to understand how it works, I'm going to give you a bit of information around that. FS1 is one of the first kind of big qualifications that you'll look to get as a skydiver. So I'll talk through how that programme typically works. I'm an FS1 coach, so I'll be talking about it from my perspective, but obviously if there's anything that's specific to kind of instructor stuff that needs an instructor, I've got one over there, might get him to help, or there's plenty of instructors who are on the call as well who can help. The second thing I'm going to talk about is jumping in groups. So getting started. Once you've got your FS1, once you are technically qualified to jump in groups, I'm going to talk some around kind of the safety and planning a jump and what to consider when you are doing kind of larger groups with your friends. Then I'll talk about the basics of 4-way, so what it is, how it kind of works, the different kind of formations and shapes that we make. Then I'm going to talk more specifically about competing in 4-way, so everything about kind of judging. So I know we've got Lucy on the webinar, she can hopefully jump in with any judging tips as we go along, but also just how to kind of understand how the whole setup works. Then I'm going to give you some tips for a successful team, and then finally I'm going to have a bit of an open Q&A where you guys can turn your microphones back on and ask me some questions. Cool, so let's get started. First thing then, the FS1 programme. It's so weird that you guys can't answer me, by the way. Whenever I do this with work, I would always be asking questions of people, so it's so weird that I'm basically doing this for myself. Anyway, so the FS1 programme. For those qualified either through RAPS or AFF, this is usually the first sticker that you'll seek to achieve. So once you've actually got your skydiving licence that says that you are qualified to skydive by yourself, you want to go and get some more qualifications that will give you some additional skills along the way. And FS1 is usually the first one because above all else, it proves that you can fly safely with other people. So we talk a lot about kind of FS formations and making shapes and scoring points and having teams and all of that kind of stuff. But really, the key thing in your FS1 is to make sure that you're learning how to be safe with other people in the sky. So it really is an essential skill for your entire skydiving career. And even if you are thinking, do you know what, I don't even want to do FS once I've qualified, I want to be able to free fly, I want to go and, be head down, I want to go tracking, whatever it might be, it's still really worthwhile to put that time and effort into FS1 because it proves that you can fly safely. So the FS1 programme, how does that work? Well, you'll jump with a coach. There is a handbook for coaches. So I'm an FS coach. We've got a handbook that kind of explains the different levels that we can go through, but you can also be quite flexible as a coach. So what you should expect from your coach is that they can work with you to understand kind of how you fly. Maybe there are some aspects of your AFF or your RAPS course that have gone particularly well, and therefore they can maybe do 2 levels in one. And there might be other times where you maybe need to repeat a level just to make sure that you get things right. So it's quite a flexible way of learning. And the aim is to learn all skills appropriate to A, save yourself from a bad situation, and B, to make beautiful shapes. So when I'm talking about kind of saving yourself from a bad situation, the stuff, in fact, I've got that on another slide. Let's have a look at that. So the levels that we would go through. So typically I talk about with my students kind of plan B situations. So the moves that we're going to teach you that will enable you to get out of maybe things not going quite to plan. So things like fast and slow fall, they're really good skills to have because if you do find yourself in a situation where you're maybe falling underneath the formation or maybe you're floating a bit too high on it, it gives you a skill to be able to get back on level with the rest of the group. Forwards and backwards. So if you found yourself kind of drifting away, you need to get closer to the rest of the group. It gives you that skill to be able to do so. And equally, if you do need to move away, whether that's just to kind of get out of the way of things or if it's about kind of building a new formation that requires you to do so, that kind of backwards movement is really useful. And side sliding as well. So sometimes when we're doing formations where maybe we're turning side on to each other, we end up drifting away. We don't want to have to turn back in and then fly in and then turn again. So we can use that side slide manoeuvre. And I also talk to my students about what I call plan A situations. So all of the skills that we need to make the pretty shapes. So that will be things like 90-degree turns, 180-degree turns, 360 turns. So all of those things that help us get into the right shape. Grip taking, so that's all about understanding how to actually take hold of each other within a formation. There are certain areas of your body that are considered to be appropriate grips. So kind of on your arms, wherever you've got the sausages on your suit, maybe on a wrist. But then there are also areas like you can't grab people by the hip or anything that's kind of within the harness. So you'll learn all about how to take grips. And we'll also teach you what's called a swoop to pin. So often when you're jumping out of a plane with your friends or in a group, you will jump together, maybe holding on to each other. But this is teaching you the skills so that if you are in a bigger group and people are getting out before you and you have to chase them, it teaches you that skill as well. And usually the whole thing concludes with a 3-way jump and then a 4-way jump, where the aim of that is to show that you can do at least 4 points, I think the BPA or British Skydiving says. We at Langer try to do kind of 6 points as a minimum, but it's all about showing how you can consolidate all of those skills that you've learned and put them all together. So if you do want to get started with FS1, here's what you need to do. So number 1, find yourself a coach. Places like Skydive Langer have plenty, so they also host progression weekends. So once everything's back to normal, look out on the Facebook group for Langer. There will be regular weekends going on where you can come along. There will be coaches available and you can learn from them. But even if it's just a normal day, just rock up, there's going to be someone on the drop zone who is able to FS coach you. The next thing is to approach the coach early in the day. So this gives them time to brief you. So the coach will need to be able to have a look at your logbook. They'll need to be able to look at any notes that have been made by your instructors along the way, and they will want to be able to give you a full brief before getting started. So it's really important. It's really important that you find someone early in the day, and try to stick with the same coach if you can. This isn't always possible, like maybe that person has a normal day job and they're not going to be there every single day, or maybe they're just not available each weekend that you are. That's fine, but I would encourage you to ask your coach to make notes in your logbook. Whenever I'm coaching somebody, if I'm picking up a new student, if they've had coaching with somebody else, it's just always really helpful to have that insight into what's gone well and maybe what that coach would recommend working on next. So hopefully that gives you guys plenty of information to help you get started. If you are looking to do FS1. Cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is jumping in groups. So once you've got your FS1, technically you are qualified to be able to jump in a group of 4 people or more. It's all about, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's all about proving you're safe to jump with other people. So you can go out, you can learn to drive a car, and technically you are safe. You can make the car move, you can make it stop, you can make it go where you want it to, but you're not Lewis Hamilton. You're not going to be the best driver ever. So bear that in mind and treat it as a driving test. Like, you've got your qualification, but you still really need to be careful and recognise the fact that you still really need to be learning. Take the time to consolidate. So jump in small groups to get used to what it's like. So it'll be different with a friend who's got similar experience levels to you compared to jumping with a coach who's got many years. So bear that in mind. Use it as a chance to don't be Jake John at a boogie here, Laura. Yeah, don't be Jake John at a boogie. Jake John's the worst at boogies. But yeah, take the time to consolidate, jump in small groups, get used to what it's like to be in the sky with other people. I said here as well, seek to be the worst one on the jump. So what I mean there is don't be a crap skydiver, obviously. But for me, when I was starting out, one of the biggest advantages I feel that I got as a formation skydiver was that so many people, especially at Langer, because the level and quality of skydiving at Langer is so high, so many of the people that I jumped were better than me. So when you're jumping with people who are better than you, you can kind of rely on them to be in the right place. You can see that if you're not close enough to them, it's probably not them, it's probably you. And it gives you a huge amount of experience just through jumping with people who are better. So there are plenty of opportunities to do that. I've mentioned kind of Langer is a great place just to jump with people at high quality, but at other drop zones as well, kind of look out for people around that you can maybe join in with. Look out as well for organised events. So things like the Big Wave Beginners Weekend, which was due to be happening next weekend, that's all about kind of bringing people who are in the early stages and putting them with people who are better. So look out for opportunities to be the worst one on the jump and to learn. Also think about safety. So it's really important to be conscious of your group choices. And by that, I don't mean, don't jump with your friends. Obviously, that's one of the biggest joys in skydiving, is to be able to go up and to jump out of a plane with all of your mates. And the likelihood is that you and your friends are at a similar experience level. So I'm not saying avoid that, but what I am saying is make good choices around that. So if you know that everybody is straight off FS1 and you're all going to be at a really quite inexperienced level, maybe keep it to 4 ways as a maximum for the first few before you grow it. Also make sure you're jumping with people who you feel safe to jump with. So if there is anyone in your group who kind of worries you for any reason, feel free to step away from a jump if you don't feel that it's going to be safe for you. Become a tracking ninja. So I don't necessarily mean kind of TR1, TR2, that kind of stuff, but just be really good at tracking away from groups. This can be practiced on your own as well. So as soon as you start jumping with kind of more people, it's important to recognise that you are going to be in the sky, obviously, together. So at the end of a jump, at what we call our break-off height, you need to be able to get yourself out of there so that you've got plenty of space when your parachute opens and you're not going to hit each other, you're not going to be getting in each other's way. So make sure that you are really good at tracking. You'll learn that throughout your FS1, but also take any opportunity to practice that. And also recognise that not everyone in your group is going to be a good tracker. So The bigger your group, the closer together you're going to be with more people. So it's really, really essential that you make sure that everybody is aware of what the tracking direction is going to be, which is 180 degrees from the centre. Make sure you're getting out of there, and that everyone is tracking for a decent amount of time, and that you're going to be in free space when your parachute opens. Also be canopy aware. So know your equipment, know that you're going to be sharing the sky, be kind of prepared for anything. If your canopy typically opens with a 180 and you typically get kind of spun around, if that's going to happen, you need to be on it. You need to be ready to use your CH2 manoeuvres to be able to get yourself out of any sticky situations that might arise. So just be really conscious of safety more than anything. And also find any opportunity that you can to learn. So Big Wave Beginners and similar events teach you the basics. So you will learn all about how to kind of approach a formation, how to exit the aircraft, how to be safe on break-off, all that kind of stuff. So formal events like that are really, really good. Walk-up load organising as well. So at quite a few drop zones, they will put on events where you can just turn up on the day, join in. You'll get plenty of kind of coaching through that as well. Something that we certainly do at Skydive Langer, and I imagine the same is true of other drop zones, is that everybody who is a load organiser will always put that time and energy into making sure that you're getting a full brief and debrief. So you can expect them to kind of talk you through everything that you need to do on the jump, and then afterwards review the video with you and talk about everything that you can do to improve. So there's a huge amount of learning that you can do through those events. Also read up on it. We've got plenty of time at the moment to read, and the mag has just gone online as well. So as well as seeing the magazine that comes through your door, you can read the mag online. You can follow Facebook groups, you can look at kind of different forums and stuff, and really have it as an opportunity to learn from people who know more than you and spot anything that you can kind of take into your own skydiving. And speak to people. So we're really fortunate to have access to amazing skydivers. So ask them about their experience, and that could be anything from kind of how did you get started to I've got a specific problem, I can't do side sliding, what would you do? And people will have different ways of explaining things as well. So if you're finding that you are struggling and you don't necessarily understand things like side sliding, for example, can be really hard, speak to somebody else and they can maybe explain it in a way that's going to be more accessible to you, and you're going to be able to understand it better. So always be looking out for opportunities to learn. We're so lucky as well in this sport that the people, it's such a small community that you have got access to people who are very good. So if you were kind of a tennis player, you can't really rock up and have a beer or a Jaeger bomb with Andy Murray in the bar and ask him about his technique, but you can turn up at Skydive Langer and be able to talk to, you know, people from Chimera or the current free fly champions, Parallel. You know, Chris is quite often in the bar. You can chat to him. You can talk to Will and Fiona Burney and people like that who've been on really big way events. You know, there's so many people around, and we can also speak to instructors all the time. So take that opportunity. It's one of the greatest things about our sport. So always be looking for opportunities to learn. Kat, just to respond to you, it's not Jaeger, it's water, obviously. I'll let you guys decide what you think it actually is. Cool. So that's everything about FS1 and kind of getting started jumping in groups. What I want to talk about now then is the basics of four-way. So this is the discipline that I have been most active in my skydiving career. It's the one that I just enjoy the most. I find that I get so much out of being part of a four-way team, and it's what I really love. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the basics and then some of my techniques. So for anyone who doesn't know, the aim of formation skydiving and four-way in particular is to build the correct formations or shapes in the correct order and as many times as possible in 35 seconds. So yeah, simple as that. How hard can it be? And yeah, you might be wondering, how on earth are people spending thousands, tens of thousands of pounds on learning this? It's all about kind of getting better all the time, but that is what it essentially comes down to, is it's building the correct shapes, doing it in the right order, and doing it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Or slots as we call them, and like most sports, each different position fulfills a slightly different role, and they all work together towards a common goal. So I'm going to talk through the individual slots in a second, but usually your slot or your position within the four-way will dictate your position in the door. So when you're getting out of the aircraft, if you are a certain slot within the team, you will usually be in a certain place in the door, as well as the types of moves that you're likely to do and who you're likely to do them with. So I'm going to talk through each of the individual slots now, and as I do, kind of maybe start thinking about the skills that you've got as a flyer and where you might be most appropriately kind of focused if you are putting together a team of your own. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the centres. So 2 people occupy what we call the centre of the formation. So this means that they are most likely to be in the middle of any formations. The centres also typically set the fall rate. So if you think about a 4-way team as being kind of 4 people behaving as one, when you are one individual, you want to arch because that creates stability. So you'll be arching from your hips, from your midpoint. Who is that sexy man? That's James Woods. Sorry, Roy is sending me a message. He says, who's that sexy man? It's Woods. So when you are an individual flyer, you will be flying belly to earth. You will be using your hips and your midpoint to kind of create that shuttlecock, make yourself stable. And in a 4-way team, the same is true. So even though it's 4 people, we've still got those 2 in the centre who are setting a good fall rate and who are kind of making sure that the whole thing stays stable. So in the centres, there are 2 centres. One of them is called inside centre. So in Chimera, that's James Woods. And inside centre, or IC as we call them sometimes, is responsible usually for the pacing of the skydive. So what I mean by that is that they will decide when everyone has built the correct shape and therefore when it's appropriate for us to move on to the next one. When you're first starting out, that means that there's going to be a lot of responsibility on that person. We talk a lot about having big eyes, and all we mean by that is that inside centre really needs to see everything. They need to be aware of what's going on. They need to know kind of which grips are supposed to be where and who's supposed to be taking them. And they need to be able to look at the whole picture and go, yep, this is correct. We can now move on. And they will do what we call keying, which sometimes is just kind of a nod of the head. Sometimes it's a flash of the arm if it's a big way, but they are responsible for kind of setting the pace and making sure that everyone's on the same page together. As you get more experienced, the actual kind of looking around and taking stock happens more quickly. For us in Chimera, James is still very much setting the pace for us, but we are in a rhythm together and everybody is kind of moving together as one. So there's much less of this kind of stop, nod, move on, but it is very much still happening. Even if you can't see it, we have still got that kind of pacing and that, what's the right word? Just taking things at the correct pace to make sure we're doing the right things all the time and having that discipline. They also often do the key in the aircraft door, which means that they decide when the team leaves the plane. I can't ignore that any louder. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate you sending that over. Right, anyway, so the inside centre will often do the key in the aircraft door. So that means that they decide when we're all leaving the plane. So you'll typically see kind of a bit of a shake. Emily says she has nothing to do with this situation. There it is. Pete says best webinar ever. Only webinar ever. Anyway, yeah, so they normally do the key in the door. They'll do kind of a shake or some kind of rhythm to let the team know when you're about to leave the aircraft. So the idea is that everyone can leave on the appropriate timing and we're all getting out the door together, and that will typically be set by the inside centre. Their moves are often smaller, just because of the kind of nature of the formations and the fact that they need to have that oversight of what's going on, but they also have to be very precise. That are often moving from in-facing, so when you're actually looking into the centre of the formation, and you're moving from that to out-facing where you're actually looking away. So quite a lot of the formations either have outside centre looking in or looking out, so if you are moving between the two, you're going to be having to do big moves. That means that they do rely on inside centre to be the stable point, so that they can work off that person, they can build off them. So for me, I know that James is going to be exactly where I need him to be, and I can kind of reference off him when I'm building stuff that's difficult for me to actually see. They also work with inside centre to set the fall rate, so they will be making sure that together with the inside centre, they are keeping things moving at a good pace for everybody. And they're usually outside of the aircraft on the exit. So if you do like kind of doing float exits, you're quite comfortable with that position, outside centre could be a good one for you. Then we have what I have called, for the purposes of this, the outsides. So 2 people occupy what we basically never call the outside of the formation. If anyone knows what the actual word for this is, let me know. But these are just the people who are typically on the outermost parts of the formation. The outsides typically fall at either the same or maybe a marginally slower rate than the 2 insides or the 2 centres. And that allows them to see over the top of the formation and to reference with one another over those other 2 people. They also set the axis of the formation. So to stop us just kind of circling around all the time in our formations, what we try and do is make sure that the 2 outside people don't really kind of move around in that way. They're staying pretty static so that we're making the most efficient moves all the time. So we often talk about the point tail axis. That's kind of what we mean by that. It's about helping us to avoid inefficient moves and to make everybody's moves as efficient as possible. So in the outsides, as I've called them, one is point. So in Chimera, that's Sarah. So the point flyer is most likely to be out-facing in a formation. And what that means is that, same as outside centre, when I was talking about how we often have to kind of move back and forth, Lucy says, can we call them axials? Sure, the world is a weird place. Let's call them whatever. I don't care. So point, so you're most likely to be out-facing as point because of the nature of the formations. Point is usually the one who's kind of backing in, having to look over their shoulder, which can be super challenging. Anyone who's kind of at any level, you'll know that if you can't see, you want to maintain that reference and that visibility. And to do so, you might find yourself kind of bending your spine a little bit, which is really bad for your position. It makes your kind of fall rate not as good, your stability not as good. So it's really quite a challenge to find a way to keep your body in a nice neutral position whilst maintaining as much visibility as possible and knowing that there's 3 other people doing some crazy shit behind you and you can't see what's going on. But that is part and parcel of that role. They're also most likely to be performing moves as the solo in a block. So I'm going to talk about what a block is in a little bit, but typically if there is one person flying on their own and then 3 people flying together, it's point who's on their own. Often the point flyer is physically the smallest in a team, and this is likely because of their position in the aircraft. So when we are setting up an exit out of any aeroplane, typically the point person is the one who's inside, squashed kind of up against the pilot end of the plane. Often they feel like they've got no space. You've usually got the frame of the door right in front of you and you feel quite squashed. So if you had someone who was physically quite large in that position, they might find it more difficult. But I would say that's not necessarily the case because, you know, when you have got the door in front of you, you're going that way anyway, so it's not like you're going to get stuck. It's just about kind of recognising that I guess it could be an advantage if you've got a smaller person on the inside. There's just more room for everyone inside the plane, but it's not a necessity. If you're taller and you still want to be point, that's totally fine. It just typically seems to be how it works out. On the other end of the physical largeness scale, we've got Will as our tail. So the tail flyer is most likely to be at the back of a formation, and they are usually in-facing. Roy Little says the best slot. I assume that you sent that message when I was talking about outside centre, and that's just got delayed. So the tail flyer is most likely to be at the back of the formation and is usually facing in. They typically have some big moves which require them to plan their route carefully, and they require them for the team to go where they're expected to go. So because of the nature of most of the formations, quite often we see Will is kind of over here getting this, and then he's got to move quickly over here to get this, and they have therefore got to be quite agile and also be able to be observant and see what's happening around the rest of the formation, because in the event that the formation doesn't move in a predictable manner, it's usually tail that ends up having to chase it. So do kind of think about that whenever you're practicing and engineering, creeping your dives. And often the tail flyer is physically the tallest of the team. I imagine that's probably because of the position that they occupy in the door. So the person who is tail will be on the outside of the plane. They're in a floating position, kind of in that position, just for the exit more than anything. Also, other people are commenting at the moment about how you have to be kind of like Mr. Tickle, as Matt Cummings says, and kind of go gadget arms. If you are having to kind of reach for stuff, if you've got someone who's taller as the tail, that can help. But I mean, the reality is that you really don't want anyone to be having to reach for anything too much. So I don't think it's about that. I think it's just much more about, if you're bigger, you like to have a lot more space in the door. Cool. And we also, when we're talking about those slots, so we've got the inside or the centres, and we've got the outsides or the aerials, but we've also got two splits that we call the front piece and the back piece. So the front piece of a formation is the two people who are kind of at the front of the door on the exit. It refers to the point and outside centre. So in Chimera, that's myself and Sarah. Being a piece means that in a block move, which I'll explain in a couple of minutes, if we split into two pairs to do a move, we will split into the front piece pair and the back piece pair. Also, the front piece is most likely to do what we call slot switching. So there are some blocks that mean that you end up in a different position to the one that you started in. So quite a lot of the time, Sarah becomes outside centre and I become point, and we've swapped with one another. So we talk about A slot, so that's the slot that you start in. But then we also talk about our B slot, which is the slot that you'll move into depending on the blocks and the dive that you're doing. So for the front piece, just because of the dive pool and the way it is, there are more formations that require the front piece to swap than there are back piece. So yeah, the front piece is most likely to slot switch as well. The back piece, therefore, is the opposite to that. So the back piece refers to the tail and the inside centre. And again, same as front piece, being a piece means that when we're doing two pairs as a block, then those guys will move together. I don't know why that's a picture of me and Sarah. That should be a picture of James and Will. Oh well, it's a nice picture. No, Lucy's asking, are there no photos of Will and Woods? We're going to have to get one, aren't we? The back piece is less likely to slot switch, but it does still happen. So tail will become inside centre and vice versa. There is also another position in four-way, the position of the camera flyer, which in Chimera is Pete. So the job of the camera flyer is to be able to film and provide footage to the judges in a competition. It's not just about competition though. Whenever you're training, if you want to get better, whether you're actually training as a team or you're just doing a fun jump or whatever it is that you're doing, having a camera flyer means that you've got that visibility of what happens within the exit, what's going wrong, kind of where you can improve the efficiencies, and it's just really good to have a camera flyer wherever you can. So having a camera flyer is absolutely essential to competition and always really nice to have regardless. It's their job to capture the four people on video and also to submit that video to the judges. The best camera flyers I've mentioned here will have a knowledge of how four-way formations work. So maybe they'll have done some four-way themselves, or they'll at least have kind of dedicated themselves to understanding what the different shapes are, what the different moves you're going to be making are. For kind of free fall time, but also for the exits, you want your camera flyer to really be aware of, or what is it that you're launching, and therefore where's the space going to be for them. So hopefully you'll have a camera flyer who's got a good working knowledge of four-way. They will also understand the needs of the judges. So for them, it's actually quite a tricky job where they've got to know what the four-way is going to do, but they've also got to know what the judges need. And also coaches, whenever we're on a training camp, Nicholas or Andy or Dennis or whoever it happens to be, will always want to look at the video. So you end up with the camera flyer has to understand all these different needs and kind of incorporate all of that into what they then provide. So the camera flyer will understand that for a judge, you don't want the team to be moving around too much in the shots. You don't want the camera flyer, therefore, to be kind of circumnavigating the whole thing. It just makes it a bit difficult to watch. Equally, you don't want the camera flyer to be too close, because the closer the camera flyer is to the team, the more of the shot the team will actually take up. And then if a judge needs to be looking at grips that are happening kind of all over the formation, they're ending up having to look around the screen. Whereas if you can kind of keep a little bit further away, it means that they can see the grips much more easily in a smaller space. On the flip side to that, the coaches will always want the camera flyer to get as close as possible so they can see as much as possible. The team will want to be able to have debriefable footage, but they'll also want to have beautiful photos, so they'll maybe want a different thing. So it's actually quite a tough job for the camera flyer. And in our experience as well, the coaches will typically be the ones who are asking the camera flyer to go and get the teas or the beers or the snacks. So yeah, not an easy job, but definitely a very important one. Cool, so that's all of the positions. Now I want to talk about the formations and the different shapes that we have to make. Let me just have some of my Jägermeister. Cool, so there are two main types of formation. The first one is randoms. So a random is a static shape, and in theory there are 16 of them. So these are denoted by letters, A through to P, not I. Guess it looks like a 1. So we've got 16 different formations denoted by letters. In theory, there are only 16 basic shapes, but in reality, each shape can also be mirrored. So you can actually flip it depending on what you're kind of moving from and to. You can also change slots. So as I've mentioned, we'll kind of swap within different formations, and you can actually build the formation slightly differently, again, depending on how you're kind of engineering the dive, which is something I'm going to talk a bit more about later. Typically as well, you can split those randoms down into 3 categories. So I find this quite helpful when I'm coaching people in particular. If they're looking for kind of the best way to move from one random shape to another, I quite like having a look at these different categories and thinking about how they can be applied to work out the most efficient moves. So the 3 categories would be a one-person centre, so something like a random A, which is this guy here. That green person is the one-person centre. It's usually the outside centre position, but they have to kind of come in, be in the middle, be quite strong, and then they've got the back piece kind of hanging off their legs, and they've got the point flyer kind of hanging off their arms. So that is what I would call a one-person centre. So you know that if you are the outside centre in that particular formation, you need to be occupying the middle of the area that you're in, and everyone else should recognise that that's going to be the case and make sure that they are not in the middle. A two-person centre would be something like a random H, for example, which is this guy here. So you can see that the green person and the blue person in this picture are actually occupying the centre of the formation together. So within normal circumstances, that's going to be inside centre and outside centre. They have to come together, they join hands, and then you've got the point and the tail kind of on the outside. So that's what I would call a two-person centre, and it's where the 2 people have to share that central space. And then we've got what we call a round. So if you've got like a J, for example, a donut, no one's in the centre, there's a gap in the centre, and everyone's kind of building around it. The way that I use that and the way that I apply it to kind of dive engineering or planning a dive is that I know that if the dive was A, J, H, for example, as outside centre, I need to be in the centre of the formation, but then for the J, I need to be completely out of the centre. And then for the H, I need to share the centre with my teammate. So I can think about that on a personal level, but also across the team, you can be having a look at it and going, right, so where is the centre of the formation? And you can kind of do it on a creeper pad, kind of put something in the middle of the creeper pad if you want to, kind of draw a mark in there and say that's the centre. And then if we are building an A, we need to make sure that that person is on that centre point. But then if we're building a J, we need to make sure that we're all kind of equidistant from that central point. It really helps to kind of work out how you're going to make each move most efficiently, because it just gives you kind of a picture to work around. Hopefully that makes sense. Cool, so that's random. So those are static shapes, and there are typically 3 categories of them. Then we've got blocks. So a block is something that includes a beginning, a middle, or an inter, as we call it, and then an end. So for most blocks, in fact, for all blocks, you will be given a picture that comprises kind of here's where you need to start, here's what you need to do in the middle, and here's where you need to end. From a lot of the formations, what you need to do in the middle is kind of dictated in terms of which way you need to turn, or kind of who needs to be doing what, but then there are some where you can kind of choose for yourself. So you might find that as you progress in your 4-way career, you'll start doing a block a certain way, and then you'll end up doing it a slightly different way, because the rules mean that you can flex it and you might be choosing the best way for you at the time. It does require the team to perform a move through the block, so the idea is that you're going from a starting point to an end point by doing something in between, and usually that can be split into one of 4 categories. So don't know why I say usually, it can always be split into one of 4 categories. The first one is 2 pairs. So if we think about something like a block 6 or a 21 or a 19, there's plenty of examples where you will be splitting into 2 pieces, front piece and back piece, and you'll be doing something. You might have 1 solo, so the picture that I've got on the screen here is a block 2, and what you can see is that Sarah as the point flyer, I mentioned earlier the point flyer is usually the solo person, so Sarah's there on her own, she's going around the 3-piece and the donut. So there are other examples like a 4, for example, where you've got 1 person doing something while 3 people are also doing something. Having 2 solos, so something like a block 20 where myself and James in the middle are connected, but then Sarah and Will on the outside are separate, or 4 solos. So that would be something like a block 14 or a 15 or a 7 where every individual has to do something on their own. So we're always kind of having a look at what type of block it is, and kind of there might be some where you've got to really learn to work together. So for, a block 18, I know that in order to make mine and Sarah's piece, which looks like this, so this is me, this is Sarah, we're holding on to each other. In order for us to make that do a 360, I have to do a bit, she has to do a bit, so you kind of share the moves. But then there are others where you're just on your own, and that can feel a little bit easier, but there are risks around kind of a block 7, for example, where technically all you have to do is turn 360 and turn it in place, but that can be really difficult to do when you're trying to kind of stay close to each other and maintain that proximity and not kick each other in the head. So there's kind of lots and lots of considerations for different blocks. Some blocks as well lead to what we call slot switches. So I've already mentioned how sometimes me and Sarah as point and outside centre will switch places. Sometimes Will and James will swap places with each other. So in theory, there are 22 blocks, but in reality, blocks can be mirrored, slots are changed. So actually, you end up learning not just 16 randoms and 22 blocks, but 30 plus randoms and goodness knows how many blocks, because there are so many different variants on how you can actually do them. The key to success in blocks, I would say, is to break them down into pictures. So no matter what level you're at, whether you're just starting out as a 4-way flyer or if you're kind of a really good team and you're just trying to build on things, understanding and being able to recognise the different pictures that happen through a block can be really, really beneficial. So for example, what I've got on the screen here is a block 21. So that's what we would call kind of a pre-close picture. I think that used to be called a black hole. I don't know, someone old will tell me. But basically what we're about to do is to end up with myself and James like this, and then the other 2 are going to be on the outside. But we know that before we get to that end picture, we want to see this picture where we've got myself and Sarah and Will and James up here. If we are there and we've got that proximity and we see that picture, we know the close is going to be easy. So hopefully that makes sense. But basically make sure that you are aware that no matter what block you're doing, it's not a case of just kind of doing it and smashing it out as quickly as possible. Try and understand the shapes that you're trying to build throughout it and the pictures that you can expect to see as you're going along. And that will help to make sure that your blocks are more consistent, that they work more efficiently, and that you can expect them to close and finish in the right place as well. We actually wrote a article in the mag on that, which I'll try and dig out. I'll see if it's online, and I'll try and share a link to it. The way that we would always debrief a block, for example, is that we look at the build first, then we look at what do we look at? So we look at the build, then we look at the technique, then we look at the timing, and then we look at the close. So if you are debriefing a block, work through those things one by one. So firstly, have you built the correct kind of build for it at the beginning? Have you got into the right shape? If not, you need to sort that out because nothing else will work afterwards. If you've got the right shape right, then you need to look at the technique. So are you doing the right thing? Then if you've got that right, you need to look at the timing. So for a block like 21, for example, we know that that's a symmetrical block and that myself and Sarah and James and Will need to be doing the same thing at the same time so that we can close it at the same time. There are others where you've got someone needs to go before someone else, so make sure that you've got the timing of it all right, and then look at the close of it. So the close will only happen, the end will only happen when those other 3 things have happened properly before it. So lots and lots to think about with blocks as well. But also blocks are really, really good fun. Randoms are great because you can kind of build lots of them and you can get through them quite quickly, but blocks are really cool because that's where you get to start throwing people around the sky and holding hands and stuff like that. So yeah. Cool. So now I'm going to talk about engineering. So engineering a dive, it's a term that I've used quite a few times already this morning, but essentially what I'm talking about here is how you plan your skydive to be as efficient and therefore as effective as possible. So engineering the dive is about finding the best way to move between different formations. It means finding the most efficient move for everybody. So it's not about kind of, I'm super fast at turning, so I'll just go. Like you need to work it out so that everybody's kind of arriving and moving at the same time. Also thinking about things like momentum. So if I'm coming into something and I'm turning this way, we want to try and work out if there's a way that I can use that momentum that I've already built up to get to the next point rather than having to kind of wheel spin and go back again. So we'll be looking at things like how we can use momentum to our advantage. We might also talk about things like familiarity. So for us in Chimera, if we're looking at engineering a dive and we think actually doing a mirrored version of this particular formation might be better, or maybe doing an A where Sarah's in the middle instead of me, or taking a different variant on a formation to make the overall dive faster, might feel like it's going to be faster, but if we haven't trained that particular shape or that particular variant, we might decide that actually the familiarity of the standard version would give us more of an advantage and would enable us to move more quickly. We also think about kind of competitive advantage as well. So if you're engineering a dive and you know that you can either have a small move at the beginning to move into a block, or you can have a small move at the end, you might say, well, if we've only got 35 seconds, we want to kind of get the smaller moves in as early as possible because we've got then more chance of having done that move and scored that point, if that makes sense. So we'll also look at things like that. So there's a lot to consider. At a basic level, that thing that I talked about with working out where the centre point of the formation is and how everyone needs to move around that should really help you. But also having a look at kind of different alternatives and just being quite logical, trying things on the creepers. Like we will often we'll walk it together and we'll kind of walk through what we're going to do and go, oh, this feels like it's going to be quite a weird move for me. Let's get on the creepers. Let's have a look and see how that's actually going to work out. And yeah, give it a go, I suppose, and see how it works. And at competitions, there's always somebody who is kind of more experienced than you, and if they are available and if they are kind of looking free to help you, then always kind of go and ask them and get their help as well, because engineering can actually be the difference between a really good dive and a really sucky dive. So engineering is really, really important. The other thing that's really, really important is flying together. So this is something that I find myself bringing up a lot when I'm coaching teams. The key to success in four-way is realising that there are no heroes. You know, you all need to fly together. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest flyer that ever lived. If you can't come into a formation and work with the other three people in your team, you're not going to win. You're not going to be successful. You really are only as strong as your weakest flyer. And in that sense, you need to be able to kind of work together, move together and facilitate the overall team success and not just kind of work for your own kind of glory. Recognising that the different slots and their role is important. So knowing that, you know, if you're coming into a team and you are quite good at quite quick turns, maybe being outside centre would be a good idea for you, but also knowing that kind of allocating people to their team set, to their skill sets, means that you're just making the best situation for everybody. It's not about kind of highlighting one person as the best, it's about creating the best situation for everyone to succeed in. And make sure that everyone is working to the same goal. So quite often, you know, flying fast might feel fast, and it does sound really cliche and really lame to say this, but genuinely, like, slow is faster. What we found is that the smoother our flying, the more aware we are of what's going on, and the more you get into the zone. You kind of feel like your whole vision is you're just focused on the four-way. You see everything because you're so aware. Your adrenaline is kind of at an optimum level, which I'm going to talk about later. You're super conscious of what everyone's doing, and everything feels really slow because you know exactly what's happening. Then you watch the video and you're like, wow, that was really, really fast. So if you feel like you're flying quickly and you feel quite frenzied, you're probably not flying very quickly at all. So it's about making sure that everyone's flying smoothly, calmly together. Cool, so that's some of the basics then of four-way. It's a good job no one's got anywhere to be, isn't it? It's like 5 to 12. Sorry, guys. Oh well. So competing in four-way FS. Firstly, how does it work? So there are usually 10 rounds or 6 rounds in a smaller competition like a UKSL meet. The draw is done prior to the competition starting, so this is where the formations and the order of the formations is decided. So if you go to Nationals at Hibblestow, they have a big screen thing where the different shapes will kind of come up on the board and it will show you the draw. Some competitions they'll just pull it out of the hat, but it's always randomly allocated. So it's very difficult for teams to, in fact it's impossible for teams to predict what dive sequence will come up, which is why the more we can kind of practice and the more we can visualise and think about, the better. And the aim is to complete the set dives for each round in the right order as many times as possible within 35 seconds. So the moment that you leave the aeroplane, the 35-second timer starts, and you as a team have to get through that set sequence of dives as many times as possible. Every time you complete a formation correctly, you score a point, and the team with the most points at the end wins. We often talk about averages as well. So it's very rare that a team will tell you, oh, we scored 250 points. They will tell you what their average was. So over a 10-round meet, 250 points would be a 25-point average. So we're always kind of working to look at how we can improve our average rather than specifically how we can score more points, if that makes sense. Categories. So when you're entering a four-way competition, there are 4 categories within FS. The first one is rookie. So this is for anyone who's just kind of starting out. The only shapes that you'll be required to make within a rookie dive will be randoms. So you'll be asked to do 3 random shapes and to complete them, same as any team, to complete as many of them as possible within 35 seconds. So rookie is a really good place to start. You can learn a lot in a rookie team. And usually there are fewer points scored just because it's less experienced people, but there's plenty of coaches around who can help you, and yeah, it's a really good starting point. The second category is single A. So this is where we start to introduce some of the blocks, some of the kind of, I guess, the easier blocks. So there are no slot switching, there's nothing kind of too complicated within the single A blocks. Then you've got double A, where there's a few more blocks added in, and then triple A, which is the top category for the most experienced people, and that's where you've got all of the blocks represented. So you will end up doing slot switches, and it will end up being kind of, a little bit more complicated. The categories also dictate how many formations are in a page of a dive. So when we talk about a page, all we mean is the set of formations, the sequence that you have to put in. So if you're in rookie, you have to do 3. If you're in A, then it's 3 or 4 because a block will count as 2. So depending on how the draw comes up, if you get 3 randoms come up in the draw, then they're not going to draw another one. But if you get 2 randoms and then a block, that means that you'd have 1 random, 2 randoms, block beginning, block end. So you have 3 or 4. Double A is 4 or 5 points in a round, and triple A is 5 or 6 points in a round. So you know that if you can get through 4 pages of a triple A dive, then you're going to be getting 20 or 24 points. And as I mentioned, blocks count as 2 formations, so there's a beginning formation and an end formation. But in order to get the point for the end formation, you have to do the correct inter, or the correct thing in between. Judging. Then the way that judges work, and I've put a picture of Ray on the screen, even though Ray's not a judge. It was the only one I could find of someone in an official capacity with the rest of us. But yeah, so people like Lucy, who's on the webinar today, she's a judge. There are lots of amazing British skydiving judges who travel around, go to the different events, and are there to judge us. So they're very skilled people who know, oh, Ray is a judge. She's an artistics event judge. That is very true. Thank you, Lucy, for that. So FS judges are incredibly skilled people who know the formations, they know all variants of them, they know that a 3 can be mirrored and therefore it'll be this way, they know that you can do an A with this person, they can spot everything and they know all of it. So quite often they have been four-way competitors themselves, but even if not, they've dedicated a huge amount of time to understanding the discipline so that they are able to kind of judge whether we're doing things correctly. They therefore count how many points you score. They're also responsible for noting what we call busts. So if you fail to complete the correct formation, if you do the incorrect move, that's a bust. So you actually not score a point for that. And the key thing is that it's the team's responsibility to show the judges the points. It's not the judge's responsibility to see them. So, it can be really frustrating as a four-way flyer if you're like, I'm obviously taking that right grip. Obviously I've taken the grip, but if you can't see it on the video, the judge can't score it because it's not their responsibility to work out that, oh, she's probably doing it. It's our responsibility as the flyers to show that we're doing it and to be as clear as possible. So that's really well worth bearing in mind. The other person who's kind of really important and essential, I would argue, to a good competition is your coach. There we go. So a coach is an essential part of your progression plan. So a coach is usually somebody who's done a lot of four-way themselves. For us, we're incredibly fortunate that we have Nicholas from Airspeed. We've also had Andy from Hayabusa recently, Dennis from Hayabusa as well, and Katie Woods from Satori and Evolution. So we've had some fantastic coaches over the years. Nicholas has been our primary one, and that's who's in the picture. But they will not only know how to do things, but they will be good teachers and be able to teach your team how to do things your way. So they will be able to spot kind of the strengths that you have as a team and make the most of those. And if there are any kind of weaknesses or challenges that you're trying to overcome, they will help you to find another way around it that is still equally valid. It might not be the same as Airspeed or Hayabusa would do it, but they will help you find a way to be successful within your team. You can pay for coaches, so we pay for Nicholas's time to gain free coaching. So years ago, I was in a team called Enigma with Pete, with Johnny Flowers and with Sam Behrman, and we were trying to prove that you could learn a huge amount on a really, really small budget. So we entered AAA, even though we all had basically no jumps each. And the way that we did it is that we just went to all of the road shows, all of the UKSL competition meets. We spoke to people at Langer all the time. We read all of the articles. We did all of the free things to learn as much as we possibly could. And we actually ended up getting a 7-point average, which meant that we were doing more than one page of every dive, which, compared to what we do in Chimera now is nothing. But at the time, for us, it was real proof that there's a huge amount you can learn without having to pay for it. So look out for those opportunities to get free coaching, free learning opportunities. Also look out for any experienced FS flyers who are around the drop zone, like Chimera. If you're at Langer, like we're around quite a lot of the time, let us know if you want any help. And keep notes and always kind of consider what you're learning. So I personally find it really helpful to write down what the coach is telling me, but then also to go back to it and kind of take stock on my own, but also as a team. Quite often a coach will give you maybe a slightly different way of doing things, and you want to sit down as a team and go, that's slightly different to what Katie told us to do, but it sounds like it works for Nicholas, so let's give it a go, but then let's work out between us what we prefer for Chimera. So it's about kind of taking on board what people are telling you and taking what's most valuable to your team. Setting a training plan is also a really important part of competition. So you'll need to know what your budget is going to be. How much does each person want to spend? It's really, really important to set that in advance, because it's just a really crap situation if you end up with one person being like, I'm really struggling, I can't afford this, while somebody else is like, money everywhere, they're just buying everything that they want. So agree a budget in advance, because that will dictate how many jumps you can do, or how much tunnel time, or even if you're going to be able to buy a team t-shirt or whatever. So make sure you agree that in advance. Share a calendar of availability. So for us in Chimera, we've actually got two. We've got a spreadsheet where we keep kind of solid plans of our coaches, and we've got kind of a nice overview, but we've also got a Google Calendar, so we share that and we'll put in things that we're doing as well as the weekends that we're not available, so that's really helpful. Find a coach and compare their availability to yours. So yeah, we've got Airspeed's calendar, so we know when Nicholas is going to be free and when he's not. And also contact drop zones to confirm their availability. We're really fortunate at Langer because we've got two planes. Both the planes have got Black Hawk engines. We can do really fast lifts, so you can get loads of jumps in. So on the whole, it's not going to be a problem. But it's worth checking in, because if there is like a big way beginners event going on, or there's going to be like multi-plane loads, or there's already a free fly event or something, that might limit the capacity. So do get in touch with drop zones in advance, especially if you're training at a smaller drop zone, which has got fewer planes and smaller capacity anyway. It's always worth just checking in and saying, we're going to be there, we're hoping to do this many jumps, have you got packers that can help us, all that kind of thing. So yeah, make sure that you're kind of setting as much of a training plan as possible, but also recognise that it is what I would call organised chaos in a lot of ways. So depending on how seriously you're taking it, you will want to be super organised. You'll need to make sure your dates and your plans work, but you also need to be able to adapt. So sometimes things can get in the way of plan A, so you'll need a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. We know it arguably more than most teams, because we've had so many things get in the way of our ideal plans along the year. So we had one year where Chris Judd had an accident and he could no longer fly with us, so we had to draft in an alternative tail. So we were lucky enough to get Johnny Flowers to help us out, but whilst it was a fantastic plan B, it was plan B, it wasn't our plan A. We had another year where Sarah got unwell and we had to stop a training camp partway through. We've got this year where we were in Spain last weekend trying to do some training when coronavirus hit and everything closed. So you've really got to be quite adaptable and flexible, and make sure that you understand that even if you set all of the best plans in place, it's not necessarily going to go that way. And know that you can only do what you can do. So if you're looking at other teams and going, oh man, they're doing so much training, it's so unfair, we want to do more. Yeah, that's them, that's not you. So you can only do what you can do. So think about how to optimise your time and try not to compare yourself too much to others. Cool. And also with the competitions, make sure that you remember to plan those into your calendar. So things like nationals, obviously you probably want to go to nationals. The UKSL meets, so I think there's 3 or 4 of those throughout the year, which are smaller competitions, 6 rounds each. They happen all around the UK, and they're a fantastic way for you to get experience as a team in a competition environment. Also indoor competitions, so things like the World Challenge, which has unfortunately just been postponed, but look out for when that gets rescheduled, because you can maybe get involved and put a team in there. Doing things like any of the scrambles events, so I know that Chris Judd and Emily put on quite a few scrambles events. Chris Judd and James used to do it together. We've done scrambles as a team. Like there's lots of stuff that you can get involved in, and competition experience is really, really valuable if you can get it. I'm laughing because Lucy just came up on my screen saying, make sure you turn up to the competition on the right day. Presumably she's making a hilarious joke there about how Chimera turned up a day late for the Win Games. So yeah, the less said about that, the better. Sometimes things don't go to plan, guys. It's just the way it is. So that's all about kind of what you can expect. And I imagine that for a lot of you on the webinar, it's stuff that you already know. For some of you, I hope it's stuff that you already know, because we're competing against you. So if you don't know how blocks work, that's pretty sad times. But hopefully it's also been useful to those of you who maybe didn't have that insight before, to give you some knowledge of how FS and how 4-way specifically can be put together, how you can build a team, the slots that you can fly in, and all of that kind of stuff too. Now I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that no one tells you. So in terms of being a successful team, it's really not just about skydiving. The biggest thing that we've learned in Chimera over the years is that being a successful team doesn't just mean being an awesome flyer. And I'm really fortunate, because the team that I've got, every single person is amazing and such a good flyer, and that's fantastic, but it won't get us anywhere without the rest of it. So what I mean by the rest of it is things like you need to be a good team player. You need to be able to empathise with your teammates. You need to be comfortable with working towards a common goal. And you need to be good friends to each other as well. You're going to end up spending a lot of time together, and if you deep down hate each other, it's just not going to be fun. And if you're not having fun, you're not going to perform at your best. So one of my tips would be to get to know each other. Find out how everyone learns, for example. There are different ways of learning. Some people are kinetic learners, so they'll need to move to learn things. Some people are quite visual, so they'll want pictures. Some people are quite audio, they'll look for kind of just people to talk to them about things. Some people need to write it down. In our team, I think James would agree that he's actually much more kind of technical in the way that he learns. He wants to understand kind of very specific moves, whereas I'm much less technical, and I just need to know to go over there, and I'll pretty much get it done. So there are different ways of learning, and appreciating that and accepting that and recognizing that that means that your debriefs are sometimes going to take different formats is really important. There's no point getting, annoyed with somebody because they learn slightly differently to you. And in the same way, there's no point in you trying to explain something to somebody in exactly the same way again and again. If they're just not getting it, you need to be able to adapt your style and help each other out. Another thing that's really good to do, and that we actually did while we were in Spain last weekend, we found ourselves suddenly with quite a lot of time, and one of the things that we did is to talk about stress and look at how that affects each person, what it kind of looks like at different levels of stress and how they'd like you to respond. So to give you an example, for me, if I'm stressed, I tend to get quite emotional. I want to talk about it. I can start feeling like, I'm letting everyone down, I'm feeling really like panicky, and I get quite kind of, and it's just not very nice for me. And what I really want from my team is that they kind of appreciate that's just how I act. I'm not trying to be an idiot about it. I'm not trying to kind of bring anyone else down. It's just how I respond to stress. And they're really good now at being able to recognise that and to kind of just say, oh, it's okay, don't worry, and not to make too much of a big deal out of it. Whereas other members of the team would prefer, if they're feeling stressed, to just be left on their own for a minute. So recognise that everyone responds to stress in a different way, and know how they would like you to respond to their stress. And also be good friends to each other. So know what they enjoy, know what makes them happy. They're not your four-way tool, as I've said here. They're a real-life human being. So if you know that, I know that it makes James really happy if we just get him some food. The same for Will. Like if Will was having a crap day and I wanted to make him happy, I'd probably just bring him a cookie or something. So that's quite nice and that's quite simple. For me, hopefully, my team know that I quite like having a hug, or kind of talk about Power Rangers or whatever it might be. Like, people have things that they enjoy, and if you know what makes your teammates happy, you can be a better friend to them and you can enjoy the experience a lot. There is a theory within sports psychology that tells us that arousal is a key part of performance. So what this graph here is showing is that if we think about arousal in terms of not just stress, but stress is part of it. So the things that get your adrenaline pumping, your kind of you feel like you're ready. Like in a competition, you probably get much higher levels of arousal. As you're getting in the door of a plane, you're probably getting higher levels of arousal because there's just a lot of stuff that's affecting you. So if you have low arousal, your performance tends to be very weak. That's where we're kind of feeling like, oh, yeah, it's all good, not really too bothered, everything's fine, I'm amazing, it's going to be cool. And you end up making stupid decisions or just doing a really poor job. At the other end, if you're super, super stressed and high arousal, you've got too much going on, you're hectic, you're not going to be able to perform because you've just got too much going on. Whereas if we can get into this kind of midpoint where we are recognising that arousal is a tool for us to use, that's where we can reach our optimal performance levels. So if you watch Chimera in a competition, quite often we will clap our hands before we get out of the plane. It's something that James got from somewhere, I can't remember, I'm sure he'll tell me, but he started doing it and the rest of us kind of started picking up on it. And it's a really good kind of release of energy for us. We all sit in the plane, especially in a competition, thinking through the dive, thinking about every move that we need to make. It's all kind of getting ready. And then just before we get out the door, that big kind of clap is what gets us going. It's like, right, this is it, guys. Let's go and, time to shine. Let's do this. And that recognises the fact that when we are in the plane, we're usually at this kind of lower level of arousal because we're trying to be, but just before we get out, we need to increase it. Equally, if we did find that, we're particularly stressed or particularly worried about a particular round, we would want to do something to bring our stress levels down. So I know with like Formula and ACM, they did a lot of like meditation and a lot of kind of listening to music in their tent and things like that, which is kind of the opposite approach to what we were taking. We were always chilled, but then trying to build it up, whereas they were kind of, their default position seemed to be quite high arousal levels, so they're actually trying to bring it down just before they go into a jump. So know what gets your own adrenaline pumping, know what that looks like for you, and therefore where your best performance is going to be achieved. And also try and get to know it as a team and consider the techniques that you can use to mediate your arousal levels. And it's not just about falling either. So skydiving is a sport and it therefore requires good fitness levels. On a busy training camp, for example, you might be running back from a lift, safely obviously, grabbing your next kit, running to the next lift, trying to kind of do things again and again and again and again, that mean if you don't have that level of fitness, you're going to really struggle. And even if you don't feel like you're struggling, you're not going to have the energy when it comes to kind of doing the formations once you're in the sky. So making sure that you have got that kind of cardio fitness is really important. The fitter you are, the more able you are to fly efficiently. But also think about things like flexibility. So I personally do quite a lot of yoga just because I think it's important for me that I'm able to be flexible, that I can use my limbs as I need to achieve the best moves that I can do. But also think about strength. So I'm on the outside of the plane, I'm doing a lot of work to kind of improve my arm strength, but there is actually a lot of strength that comes from just having to hold yourself in the positions that we're in. In the tunnel, it seems to be exacerbated. We get out of the tunnel and our arms are like dying because it's just such an unusual position to be in where you're pushing down on air. That just, you never do that in normal life. So the fitter you are, the more you're working on your physical fitness, the better. And actually, whilst the situation that we're currently in is a really, really crap one, this is the time when we can be getting out and running, or we could be using our pull-up bars, or we can be doing our press-ups, or whatever. You can be getting yourself in the best physical conditions so that when you do get back to a point where you and your team can train, you're ready for it and you're good to go. It's also a really nice social thing. So this picture is us in Spain last weekend. We didn't have anything else to do. Everything was closed. So we went on a 12k run around Emporia Brava. It was so fun. It was such a good time. We all really enjoyed it. And exercise really gets your kind of emotional levels up as well. It makes people feel much more positive. So if you are on a training camp, or if you're kind of just spending a lot of time together, getting out there and exercising together can be really, really nice. Another thing that can be really powerful is visualising. So in the UK, especially, we're sometimes hit by things like weather holds, for example, that mean that we can't train the way that we'd like to. So actually kind of visualising and imagining what the dive would look like in your mind can be really, really powerful. I mentioned Enigma and how we did all of the kind of free training before. Visualising was a big part of that. So just thinking through in your mind, trying to put yourself in that situation of what would it look like to me? What would I see? Also, if you want to, what would it look like from the camera's point of view? I know that everyone kind of visualises differently. I think for Sarah in my team, she's much more of a top-down visualiser. I'm much more of an in the formation visualiser. Both are completely valid. You can do both. You can do one or the other. But giving that time to actually thinking about things is really, really beneficial. Also look for opportunities to learn on the creepers or to watch videos of other teams. So obviously don't go out on the creepers now because it's difficult to creep when you're 2 meters apart. But once we're back in normal life, get on the creepers. You know, if it's a weather hold at Langer, go around to the creeper pad, grab a member of Chimera or one of the staff or just anyone who's a more experienced flyer than you. You don't even have to be creeping with 4 people that you're in a team with. Just grab some people and just say, do you want to go and creep some stuff? And have a look and start learning that way. Also watching videos of other teams. If you go onto YouTube and just look for like Arizona Airspeed or Hayabusa or, you know, any competition that's happened, you can just go through and you can watch videos of those people and learn a lot as well. And we want a guest appearance from Mika. Hang on, here he is. Mika! There he is. This is my cat. He's called Mika.
Mika, stop.
Right. So yeah, that was the last thing that I had to share. So what we've talked about then, the FS1 programme. So just look out for opportunities to get that coaching. If you come to Langer, there's progression weekends that happen all the time. You can come and get a coach, even if you just rock up. Try and turn up early in the day, and they will help you get through those levels to make you safe in the sky. Jumping in groups, safety first, I think, is the big thing. So make sure that you've got the appropriate number of people in your group. Just because you've got your FS1 doesn't mean you need to start doing 100 ways. It means kind of start small and be safe. The basics are 4-way, so you need 5 people ideally, 4 if you don't want a cameraman, but it's all about kind of making the right shapes in the right positions and not trying to do it just for yourself. You have to be part of a team. That's how it works best. I talked about how competition works, and then my top tips. It's all the stuff outside of skydiving that you need to think about as well. This cat. And that's it. So that's everything that I kind of prepared for you guys. Now, if you like, feel free to turn your microphones on and I'll answer any questions. Awkward pause, says Chris. I don't think it's awkward. I do this for a job, and my favourite thing is awkward pauses. Let's have a look and see if there's anything coming through on Facebook as well. No, nobody. Emily says cats. That's not a question. Come on, you might as well speak to other human beings.
Hi Laura, it's Lucy.
Hi Lucy.
What's your favourite block?
Ooh, what's my favourite block? Oh, I'll answer your question in a second, Kat, as well. What's my favourite block? I don't know, that's a really hard one, because for us, we seem to have this thing where we will sometimes be absolutely amazing at a block, and then all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, we can't do it anymore, and we'll be amazing at another one. So I think it really depends on when things are happening. I would say that 21 is always a lot of fun. 21 is the one that I remember from just starting out, from when we were in Enigma, and we couldn't remember the names of stuff. So a 21 really is called Zigzag Marquee, but we didn't know that when we were in Enigma. We were all young and stupid, and we used to call it Boom Motherfucker, because the idea of a 21 is that you have to spin these two pieces, and then you're not meant to, but the way that we did it, you kind of smash the two centre people together at the end, so that was always really good fun. And for us, now that we're in Chimera, I think it's quite a nice one to have seen the progression of, because when you first start doing a 21 in the early days, you're very much taking it step by step, and it can be quite a slow process, whereas for us now, we're like, it goes really quickly, and it's really good fun. And yeah, so 21's definitely up there. I'll pick 21. Kat's question, which is my favourite Power Ranger? I mean, I don't think that's a difficult one for anyone to guess. I like the pink one. Any other questions? Lucy says, hello friends. What else have we got? I'm looking on my phone, by the way. If anyone's got any questions that they want to ask, pop them on Facebook. Roy's just sent me one. What did he say? Who's your favourite Puma? J-Lo, obviously. How do I see all the stuff that's coming through? Oh, blimey. Got 50 now. That's an error. Roy said, apparently, how do you feel when you're in the door? How do I feel when I'm in the door? It depends. So, well, it doesn't depend, actually. I'm going to change my answer completely. It doesn't depend at all. The way that I feel in the door is that I'm about to go and do something for 35 seconds. It's what I've trained for. It's what I've practiced with my team. It's what we've dedicated all our time and effort to. So, you know, Roy knows this because he's also in an awesome team called Eros. But there's so much that goes into getting to that point of being in the door. You've been exercising to keep yourself fit. You've been visualising to make sure your mind is ready. You've been socialising to make sure you're good friends to each other. You've been training really hard. You've done your tunnel season. You've done your jump season. You've done tunnel with rigs. You've had to go through adversity, change your plans. Like, there's so much that's gone into it. But at that point, when I'm in the door, that's what it's all been for. So I feel really calm once I'm in the door. I'm ready. And I think you have to trust that everything you've done is enough. And if you don't, that's where you're going to make mistakes. So yeah, that's my answer. Whenever I'm in the door, regardless of what the situation is, I'm calm. I feel confident. I've told myself what we've done is enough, and let's just go and enjoy it. Let's have a look. Other questions. Alex Hale says, can you comment on what you've learnt about how to deal with funnels or other bad jumps as a team? Well, we never funnel and never have a bad jump. So, yeah, can't really help. No, I'm just kidding. What you've learned about how to deal with funnels or bad jumps. So, I talked about how we have talked as a team about how we deal with stress. And that stress isn't just kind of nerves and stuff like that. It's also the post-jump stress where someone's maybe not done the right thing, or it hasn't gone well as a team, or maybe you had a brain lock, or you're just not happy with your own performance, or sometimes, you know, it's rained on the jump. That genuinely happened to us once, and it stressed us all out so much. And it's how you deal with that that's the most important. So for us as a team, we have talked about how we like to respond, and if it's a competition, we meet on the landing area, give each other a high five, and we move on to the next jump. If it's a training jump, we'll probably have a little bit more to say about it. But again, we'll keep that discussion for a more appropriate time. If we're about to go up on another lift, we don't want to put everyone in a bad mood or make everyone feel sad. So we'll just kind of mention it, park it for our debrief, and then go through it. Unless, of course, it's something that we can learn from immediately. So if you get down from a jump and you're like, Will says to me and James, that fall rate wasn't fast enough for me, we want him to say that as soon as we land so that we can fix that, because that's something we can fix straight away. So I think it depends on what the thing is. But my top tip on what we've learned about how to deal with it is to agree how you want to deal with it as a team. Decide what's going to be the most productive way. If it's to talk about it, fine. If it's to high five and move on, fine. But it's about finding the right way for your team. Josh asks, is there any other point in your life where you clap to get aroused? Yeah. Jake John, what is your visualization technique and how has that developed over time? Okay, I have a good answer to this. So I like to make use of dead time, as I call it. So I know that Pete does this as well. When I'm brushing my teeth, I do squats because and I am going to answer your question, I promise, but as outside centre, one of the things I need to be able to do is to launch myself quite powerfully using my thighs to be able to get the kind of move that I need in the door. So I use the time when I'm brushing my teeth to just do some squats, because what else am I going to do? The other time when you've kind of got dead time is on the toilet. So for us in Chimera, quite a few of us will use that time when we're going to the loo to visualise a dive. We had one point, I think this was a couple of years ago, where we actually had like a dive of the day or a dive of the week, and you just text each other and say, this is a random dive that we've come up with, and you can kind of visualise that. So that's quite a good way of doing it. The way that my visualisation technique has developed over time is I think the more I learn, the more I'm aware, and therefore the more I can put into my visualisation. So when you're just starting, it can be quite difficult to even imagine what it's going to look like inside a formation if you haven't done that before. So thinking about videos that you've seen maybe of other teams and watching those, maybe you'll visualise more from that top-down angle because it's just really remembering what you've seen of other teams. But as you get more skill and more knowledge and more experience, you can start to actually put yourself in the formation and visualise what that's going to look like. And not just what it looks like, but what it feels like. So quite often, if you see me visualising, you'll know I'm visualising because I might have my eyes closed, I might not, but I've typically got quite twitchy legs going on, or I'm doing stuff with my body. Even as I've been talking to you guys, I can't talk about doing a move without moving my body. So the more that you are aware, the more you can actually replicate what happens in real life in your head while you're visualising. But try doing it on the toilet. Why not? Maybe we could do that as a Langer thing. Maybe I'll start posting a dive of the day for you guys, and you can let me know if you've got any questions about it and visualise it on the toilet. There you go. Matt Cummings says, you have plenty of dead time to visualise now, Jacothon. Let me have a look. Who's your favourite Puma? We've already done that one. If anyone else has got a different favourite Puma, let me know, but I imagine everyone's just going to say J-Lo. Hold on, you're not meant to smash a 21 together? No. What's your favourite Power Ranger? Always launch an E. I think I've answered all the questions that are on there. Matt Cummings says my favourite Puma is Flanders. Roy says it's Potter. I'm going to have a look on Facebook again and see if anyone has commented. Cat Brown, is there a phone number? I'm struggling to download the app. Sorry. No questions there. Any more questions, Chris Kirk? Cool. All right. Well, there we go. Hour and a half, exactly, as I said. Oh, no more questions. What's your favourite competition that you attended? Oh, I can answer that one. My favourite competition so far is... So I have two, actually. For Chimera, my favourite one is actually the World Cup that we went to last year. So this ended up being the last competition that we did in the lineup that we had. So it was me, James, Sarah and Chris Judd. Unfortunately, Matt couldn't make it, but fortunately, I guess we had Chris Cook there as well. So it was quite nice, kind of being the last one. We didn't know at the time that it was the last, but we'd come out of nationals being overall pleased with our performance. We wanted to win, like obviously every year we want to win, and we felt that we showed our potential to be able to do that, but we maybe didn't maximise our potential every step of the way. So it was a tricky meet. And then we took a bit of time off before we were going to the World Cup. And during that time, we were just able to kind of reflect on what happened and talk to each other and getting back into a good place where actually we recognised that the training we'd done was enough. Like we didn't have to push as hard as we did at Nationals in order to do well, because actually it was that pushing hard that held us back. So when we got to Eloy for the World Cup, our approach was genuinely just, let's do what we do. Let's do everything we've trained, but let's not try to do more than that. We don't need to. We can actually do really well with this. And as it turns out, we did have a really good meet. We were really proud of the scores that we got. It was a little bit busty, but yeah, it was something we were really proud of. And I think it was a really good example of how you don't need to do more than what you've trained. And that's a lesson that we're going to be taking into all of our future competitions. My other favourite competition has got to be when I went with the Awkward Turtles to Turga, which was just the most amazing experience. It was a ridiculous delegation that we had, in that the Awkward Turtles were there. Like, I know many of you on the call are Awkward Turtles, and we were not the best team. We were lucky enough to be able to go because no one else was going, but we went out there, we did our best. We had Georgie in the team, who is just like the most popular person in the world with anyone. So we ended up making loads of friends through Georgie. We had fancy dress every night. We all dressed up in togas and dressed up as superheroes. And it was just the most fun. So yeah, there are some competitions that are really, really fun and some that you learn a lot from. And those are the two that stand out for me. Lucy says 6th in the world. Yeah, you know it. 6th best 8-way team ever. Other questions. When's the next one? What's next? Will there be another one? I'll answer when's the next one and will there be another one now. The next one, I believe, will be, and Emily Orcutt, please shout up if I'm wrong, the next one will be the Big Wave Beginners next weekend. So providing it's still mid-apocalypse, Matt Cummings says Big Wave Beginners. So providing we're still not allowed outside, it will be a webinar in similar style. I don't know if the guys will choose to use this exact same format. Like, let us know how it's gone and if you've enjoyed Google Hangouts, if you'd rather do it a different way. But those guys will be putting on an event about Big Wave Beginners. So if you want to learn anything about how to get started in Big Wave, or if you're an experienced Big Wave flyer and you want to come along and contribute, or if you're just bored, come and get involved. We've also got, Emily has been talking about doing some B-licence briefs, so I think that would be quite good to attend. I think there's a post on the Facebook group if you want to get involved. And then I was also thinking, I don't know what you guys think, but maybe we could do some more social activities as well. So something like a pub quiz you could do online. If anyone's up for doing a pub quiz, let me know. I'd be happy to organise something, or I'm sure if anyone else wants to pick something up. It's also worth noting that British Skydiving and Skydive Langer have all been really supportive of this. So I think one of the biggest things that we're currently missing out on because we can't meet up is that community side of things. So they're both organisations, and Chimera as well. We're all really passionate about keeping that community spirit going. So if you do want to put on a seminar like this, if you've got anything you want to share, feel free to shout up and do it and organise it, and we'll all help you promote it.